Imagine stepping into a time machine and traveling back to 1955 Britain. You have £1 in your pocket. Just £1. Today, that might barely get you a cup of coffee in a London cafe. But in 1955, that single pound was a gateway to an entire world of possibilities. It was enough to feed a family, to enjoy entertainment, to purchase items that would be considered luxuries by some standards. This is the story of purchasing power. This is the story of how dramatically our world has changed in just 70 years. What once could be purchased with a modest amount of money now requires substantially more. The value of money has eroded in ways that seem almost unbelievable to modern audiences. Today, we will embark on a journey through time. We will explore the everyday prices of 1955 Britain. We will discover what your pound could buy, what your shillings and pence meant in practical terms, and how ordinary people lived in this fascinating era of post-war recovery and growing prosperity. Prepare to be surprised, amazed, and perhaps even a little nostalgic for a time when money stretched much further than it does today. Before we can appreciate what a pound could buy, we must first understand the money system itself. In 1955, Britain used a currency system that had been in place for centuries. It was a system that would seem exotic and complex to modern ears, yet to the people of that era, it was as natural and straightforward as our decimal currency is to us today. The basic unit was the pound, represented by the symbol pound. 1 pound equaled 20 shillings. A shilling, written as S, was worth 12 pence. This meant that 1 pound contained 240 pence. These numbers seem unusual today because we are accustomed to a decimal system where 1 pound equals 100 pence. But in 1955, the arithmetic was different, and people navigated this system with ease. For smaller transactions, prices were often written in shillings and pence. For example, an item might cost 3 shillings and 6 pence, written as 3/6d or 3/6. There were also coins of various denominations. A farthing, though becoming rare by 1955, was worth a quarter of a penny. A halfpenny existed for very small purchases. There were pennies, of course, 3-penny bits with their distinctive 12-sided shape, sixpences, shillings, florins or 2-shilling pieces, half-crowns worth 2 shillings and 6 pence, and crowns worth 5 shillings. For larger transactions and for practical everyday use, there were banknotes. A 10-shilling note, worth half a pound, was commonly used. There were 1-pound notes, 5-pound notes, and 10-pound notes. Some shopkeepers also priced their most expensive items in guineas, a unit equal to 1 pound and 1 shilling, or 1 pound and 5 pence. The psychological effect of this currency system was significant. People could discuss spending a few pence or a shilling without feeling excessive. A pound represented real money, a significant sum for many working people. To understand what a pound meant in 1955, we must also understand what people earned. The average weekly wage for a working man in 1955 was approximately 4 to 5 pounds. A pound, therefore, represented roughly 1/5 to 1/4 of a week's wages for an ordinary worker. To put this in modern perspective, financial analysts calculate that 1 pound in 1955 possessed the purchasing power of approximately 30 to 35 pounds in today's money. Some calculations place it even higher. This vast multiplication factor helps us comprehend just how much has changed in 7 decades. What we might today spend carelessly was, in 1955, the object of careful household budgeting. Let us now explore what a pound could purchase in the grocery stores of 1955 Britain. Food, naturally, was one of the primary expenses for every household. Rationing had only recently ended in 1954, so the abundance available was still relatively fresh in people's minds. For about 3 you could purchase a fresh loaf of bread from your local baker. This was not a fancy artisan loaf, as we might expect today, but a standard white loaf that would constitute a staple of the British diet. Bread rationing had ended just the year before, so being able to buy bread freely was still something of a novelty and pleasure. A pint of milk, essential for every household, cost approximately threepence. A dozen eggs would cost you about 1 shilling and 6pence. Butter, still considered somewhat of a luxury despite rationing's end, cost approximately 5 shillings per pound weight. For 2 pence, you could purchase a tin of baked beans and tomato sauce, a product that was becoming increasingly popular in British kitchens. Fresh vegetables were remarkably affordable. A pound of potatoes cost only a penny or two. Cabbages were so cheap they were practically given away, costing less than a penny each. Carrots, turnips, and other root vegetables were similarly inexpensive. Apples cost about a penny or twopence each, depending on the season and quality. A bunch of bananas might cost 4pence to 6pence. Meat, the centerpiece of most British meals, was moderately priced but required careful budgeting. A pound of beef cost approximately 1 shilling and 3pence to 1 shilling and 6pence. Chicken was more expensive, costing around 1 shilling and 6pence to 2 shillings per pound, making it a treat rather than an everyday purchase. Bacon, essential for the full English breakfast, cost about 2 shillings per pound. The variety of canned and packaged goods available in 1955 was growing. Tinned tomatoes, condensed milk, jam, and various other preserved foods were increasingly affordable. A tin of condensed milk might cost 4pence or 5pence. Jam jars were inexpensive, costing around 6pence to 9pence. With £1, you could purchase an entire week's worth of basic provisions for a family of 4, assuming careful shopping and no wastage. Or you could treat yourself to a considerably more luxurious selection of goods. The point is that £1 represented genuine purchasing power in the food markets of 1955. £1 could feed people. Beyond food, £1 could purchase an impressive array of household items and clothing. The world of shopping in 1955 was vastly different from today, as many goods were built to last and were priced to reflect their expected longevity. Clothing was relatively affordable. A man's cotton shirt could be purchased for approximately 5 shillings to 7 shillings. A pair of trousers might cost around 10 shillings to 15 shillings. Women's dresses varied widely in price, but a simple everyday dress could be purchased for around 7 shillings to £1, placing a complete outfit well within the range of weekly purchasing power for a working family. Children's shoes cost around 5 shillings to 8 shillings per pair. A complete pair of socks would be only threepence or 4pence. Stockings for women cost about 9pence per pair. Underwear was remarkably affordable by modern standards, with a pair of knickers or vest costing only a few pence. In the realm of household goods, the options were plentiful. A basic kitchen cup or mug would cost just a penny or twopence. A plate would cost a similar amount. A simple bar of soap for washing dishes would be a penny or halfpenny, incredibly inexpensive by today's standards. Cleaning products were similarly cheap. A tin of Omo washing powder cost around 10pence. Toiletries were available at very reasonable prices. A tube of toothpaste cost approximately 4pence. A bar of soap for personal washing would be twopence to threepence. A bottle of hair oil might cost 4pence or 5pence. For those interested in home furnishings, options were available at modest prices. A simple wooden chair might cost 5 shillings. A small table could be purchased for around 7 shillings to £1. Curtains and other textiles were similarly affordable, though quality varied significantly depending on where you shopped and how much you were willing to spend. Newspapers and magazines were inexpensive reading material. A daily newspaper cost 1 penny. A popular magazine or comic might cost twopence. For those who enjoyed reading, books could be borrowed from the public library for free or purchased at modest prices from used bookshops. With £1, a person could outfit themselves with multiple pieces of basic clothing, purchase numerous household essentials, or invest in items that would last for years. The concept of disposable clothing and throwaway goods was virtually unknown in 1955. Entertainment in 1955 was both accessible and affordable. The cinema, or movie theater as Americans would say, was the primary form of entertainment for most working people. Cinema admission cost approximately 6 pence to 1 shilling. A couple could enjoy an evening at the pictures for just 2 shillings, or a family of 4 for around 4 shillings. This left a working family considerable budget remaining from their pound. The music hall and variety theaters were more expensive but still affordable. Tickets to see live entertainment might cost 1 shilling and 6 pence to 3 shillings, depending on the quality of the production and the location of your seat. The radio, a marvel of the age, provided free entertainment once you had purchased the receiving set. Many families had invested in a radio during the previous decade, and the BBC provided a comprehensive schedule of plays, music, comedy, and sports commentary. For the more active, sports offered entertainment at reasonable cost. Admission to a football match might cost 1 shilling or 1 shilling and 6 pence. Cricket matches were similarly priced. These were the primary spectator sports of the era, and they attracted large crowds from all social classes. For children, entertainment was virtually free or nearly so. A visit to the park cost nothing. Playgrounds and public recreation areas were available without charge. A bag of sweets or toffees from the local confectioner might cost a penny. An ice cream cone cost 2 or 3. These small treats represented accessible luxury for children. For those interested in hobbies, the costs were reasonable. A hobby magazine might cost 2 or 3. Materials for hobbies like model building or crafts were inexpensive. A packet of model airplane parts might cost 6 pence to 1 shilling. Painting supplies and other art materials were similarly affordable. Alcohol was available at prices that seem almost unbelievably cheap by modern standards. A pint of beer at a public house cost approximately 4 pence to 6 pence. A pint of bitter was the standard working man's drink, and it represented an affordable evening's entertainment. A small glass of whiskey might cost 10 pence. Wine, for the more sophisticated, was considerably more expensive but still accessible. Dancing was a popular entertainment, particularly for young people. Admission to a dance hall cost around 1 shilling. A cup of tea or soft drink at the dance might cost a penny or 2. For £1, a young person could enjoy several evenings of dancing and refreshment. With £1, a family could enjoy a week's worth of entertainment, or treat themselves to a special evening out with some comfort and luxury. Entertainment, while important, was not the dominant expense of household budgets in 1955. Various services that people required in their daily lives were remarkably affordable in 1955. A haircut at the barber cost approximately 1 shilling to 1 shilling and 6 pence. Women's permanent waves, which took several hours, cost around 5 shillings to 10 shillings, representing a significant but achievable expense for women who wanted this service. Dental services were available through both private practitioners and the newly established National Health Service. NHS dental treatment cost very little, as it was subsidized by the government. Private dentistry was naturally more expensive, but even a filling or extraction might cost only a few shillings. Laundry services were available for those who could afford them, typically costing around 6 pence to 1 shilling for washing and pressing a suit. Many families sent their wash to commercial laundries, though many others still washed clothes at home using considerable physical labor. A letter could be mailed anywhere within Britain for 1 penny. Postage was a trivial expense. A telephone call from a telephone booth cost 1 penny for a local call, making communication relatively accessible even for those of modest means. Repairs to shoes were inexpensive. A cobbler might resole and heel a pair of shoes for around 2 shillings, extending the life of footwear considerably. Tailoring services, such as hemming trousers or adjusting jacket fit, cost only a few pence. These services, while important to daily life, did not consume a large portion of household budgets. The affordability of services in 1955 reflected the relatively lower cost of labor at that time. Moving beyond daily expenditures, we can consider what more substantial purchases cost in 1955. These items represented savings goals and significant household investments for ordinary people. A bicycle, a crucial form of transportation, cost approximately £4 to £6. This represented several weeks of wages for a working person but was considered an essential investment for a teenager or young adult. A motorcycle might cost £15 to £20. An automobile was substantially more expensive, costing anywhere from £300 to £500, putting it completely out of reach for most working families in 1955. A radio set cost about £10 to £15 in 1955. A television set, still a relatively new technology and quite expensive, cost around £80 to £150. The cost of a television was comparable to several months of wages for an average worker, which explains why television ownership was still a luxury in 1955, though it was rapidly becoming more common as prices gradually decreased. Furniture purchases represented significant investments. A three-piece suite, consisting of a sofa and 2 armchairs, might cost £30 to £50. A bed and mattress might cost £10 to £15. These purchases were often made gradually, with families saving over time to accumulate their household furnishings. Books, purchased rather than borrowed, were relatively affordable. A novel might cost 3 shillings to 5 shillings. Technical or specialty books might cost more. Building a personal library was a realistic goal for many people of modest means. A wedding dress for a bride might cost £10 to £20, representing a substantial purchase but achievable for a family saving for such an occasion. Men's suits cost around £3 to £5. These were significant purchases but represented items that would last for years with proper care. In context, a pound represented valuable purchasing power for everyday necessities but represented only a fraction of the cost of larger items that required careful saving and planning. Understanding prices in 1955 requires appreciating the historical context. Britain had only recently emerged from a decade of post-war austerity and rationing. The war had ended in 1945. But rationing of food and other goods had persisted until 1954. The availability of goods in 1955, while still modest by today's standards, represented a dramatic improvement from the scarcity and restrictions of the previous decade. The 1950s were years of optimistic recovery in Britain. The newly established National Health Service provided free medical care to all. The welfare state was expanding. Employment was generally full, and for those who had survived the depression of the 1930s and the hardships of the 1940s, the 1950s represented a genuine improvement in living standards. Prices in 1955 reflected an economy where manufacturing was still a dominant sector of employment. Labor was relatively inexpensive compared to goods, leading to lower prices for manufactured items. Agriculture was still productive and relatively local, keeping food prices moderate. Transportation and energy costs were low, allowing businesses to keep prices accessible. Interestingly, some categories of spending consumed a much larger portion of household budgets than they do today. Housing costs were often lower in absolute terms, but rent or mortgage payments could consume 30 to 40% of household income. Modern housing costs vary but are often comparable percentages. Clothing, on the other hand, represented a much larger portion of household budgets in 1955 than it does today, as clothing purchases were less frequent and more substantial. The dramatic change in purchasing power over 70 years reflects decades of inflation, currency debasement, and economic cycles. What cost £1 in 1955 today costs between £30 and £35, demonstrating how substantially the value of money has eroded. We have journeyed through 1955 Britain and discovered what a pound could purchase. We have seen that the pound of that era possessed purchasing power that seems almost magical to modern audiences. A pound could feed a family, clothe a person, provide entertainment, and purchase goods that would last for years. But this journey is not merely about nostalgia or a celebration of lower prices. It is a reminder of how our economic systems have changed, how inflation has gradually transformed the value of currency, and how the world of commerce and consumption has been revolutionized in the past 7 decades. In 1955, shopping was a local activity. People bought what they needed from nearby shops, where shopkeepers knew their customers and often offered credit. Goods were expected to last. Nothing was disposable. Fashion changed slowly. People wore the same clothes for years and repaired rather than replaced them when they became worn. Today, shopping is global, immediate, and often frivolous. We can purchase goods from anywhere in the world and have them delivered to our homes within days. We upgrade our possessions frequently, often discarding perfectly functional items to acquire new ones. Fashion cycles rapidly, driving consumption. The pound of 1955 tells a story of a different economic age. It was an age when money was valued differently, when prices reflected different assumptions about labor and resources, and when the rhythm of consumption was entirely different from what we experience today. Understanding the purchasing power of 1955 helps us understand our own time more clearly and appreciate how dramatically our economic world has changed in just 70 years. When we examine the prices of 1955, we are not merely looking at historical curiosity. We are examining a mirror to our own economic systems and values. The prices of 1955 Britain reveal an economy in transition, a society rebuilding after war, and a population experiencing the first genuine prosperity many had ever known. In doing so, they reveal much about ourselves and how we have chosen to organize our economic lives in the 21st century.